Welcome to Warblog. This is the fourth attempt at this game because I wanted to just explain a few additional features or at least thoughts, considerations on this game. So I'll click play straight into it. Now, if you've seen some of the other videos, they're probably more focused on some of the little errors. The errors have been sorted out, and there's still a few sort of development issues. Nothing major. All the units fire and move and do the things they're supposed to. Anyway, what has sort of changed? Two things that I'm really looking to communicate. Firstly, I've added all this air defense. It looks a bit silly now because it just looks like the whole map's been invaded by domes. Air defense is sort of, this air defense essentially is basically just some sort of heavy machine gun, mounted for firing into the air. I don't think that this is sort of like a missile system or anything like that, but I think now all units will always have an inherent air defense factor, but when there's such a small number in there, it'll be so minimal, it'll be irrelevant. Although, to be quite honest, I don't think this is going to be that relevant, but it's sort of something. Now, the only problem I've got with air power at the moment is that they can, I think, engage in an assault. So he has a fire factor of 3. I've yet to write it into the rules that if he attacked this unit, that 3 wouldn't count. Basically, air defense shouldn't count in offense. Although in theory you can. I've yet to get my head around all of that, but for example, if you had one of these modern fancy surface-to-air missile systems, you couldn't use that in defense, in attacking another hex. But like the 88 flaks, commonly used as anti-tank weapons. I mean, you could, in theory, use them for other purposes, but just keep things simple. Air defense is for air defense. Its defensive factor when attacked will be whatever it is. So in this case, 1, which is probably quite high because even a 10 unit would only have a 1. Anyway, essentially what I've done, I've added a lot of air power. Now, that sort of almost brings us to the second part of why I'm doing this. I played this through before, and it's quite easy to take out Kinseba, whatever it is. It's quite easy to take that out and then to move on to there. But the reason it's sort of easy, I'm thinking, and I have yet to really get my head around this, is because you've got a lot of air power. And the air power goes in there and basically destroys them, and then you go in with your ground troops. And I think that's pretty much what happened. I hinted at that in my video the other day. But I think that's pretty much what happens. I didn't see much fire coming back. And I've been considering it. I was thinking, well, this could be like although it's not modelling or simulation, I mean, you could almost consider this to be, to some extent, a model or simulation of what happened. Although the rules are, to be quite honest, they're not. I don't think you could say it's a simulation, but well, it keeps coming out the sort of same way, and I would do the same thing. If you were to be heavily pounded by all this air power and then have all these units, you would run away, and I think that's pretty much what they did. They must have. I mean, there wasn't they seemed to be firing at things that weren't firing back. I mean, I've not been involved in any wars, but I think they were probably advancing quite cautiously against what was an incredible objective. If you look at it, it's just on the top of some mountains. But anyway, so what I'm trying to get to here is you can take this out quite quickly and quite simply, but you end up losing all your air power. By the time you've done this one, you've pretty much used all your air power between this and this. You might, if you then start to think ahead, start to save some air power for this, this, and this. But what I'm trying to get to here is, as a game, not a historical representation, to take out all of these units with this, I think you actually have to start actually thinking. I think you have to be quite clever. Not so much clever. I think you have to approach it in a way that allows you to do that. It's not easy. Taking these two out is easy, but once you get these, they become a little tougher. I mean, for example, this has got 6 units in there and is entrenched. So he's worth well, he's worth 12 with his silly air defense. That'd be 14. These guys, there's 4 in there. I think 4 in there. So maybe it's not as tough as I was thinking. And to be quite honest, I might actually put some more rebel units in there. I don't know why they're quite low at the moment. I think I was getting confused with the other one, but either way, I think it's a push to take all of these units out with just this force. But anyway, I'm going to start sort of playing it, and I'm going to use the same strategy I used before, and that is to move all my units out of his artillery range. 1, 2, 3, 4. I keep doing that. That's not a road. One of the things you've got to watch out in these games. No, as I said in the other game, but I'm repeating. But I'm going to do a toggle so you can actually look at the map, because I couldn't see that because he was on it. So I need something like some kind of toggle so you can look at the map. Now that puts me into the same position I was before. It's one of the things I like about opening moves. You can do them again and again, and tend to sort of have a set opening move. It's not like chess. I can try a different strategy, and I could maybe try and come through this way, take all these units out, and do this last. I mean, that would be a different strategy, but I'm trying to play this historically at least. Now, I'm not moving any of these units, not because I don't want to play strategically for them. Again, I think the whole point of their rebels is they're basically in a defensive posture. I don't think they're going to be there's any benefit from coming out entrenched. So now these units I think are actually otherwise hard to get, but 1-to-1 in exchange. Well, I don't expect anything, but I was hoping possibly for some air defense cover there, just to see whether or not it worked. Okay, so and they've got nothing to fire on, so not do anything. I'm quite interested in how this air defense works. What I've sort of just realised is that air defense works in a radius 1, 2, 3, 4. So this has the air defense factor of 3, 4, 5, 6 across that area, which is interesting. Now I think that's only a sort of it's more than 6% chance, but it's around about 6% chance just for the sake of argument. And so far their air defences have no effect. So this is one of the reasons I'm playing this through this time. Well, we're getting some good results, or some reasonable results anyway, because now they're all sort of 70% reduced. And I think it's a fair strategy, but as I'm trying to sort of highlight, this is committing all this air power. After that, sort of back to just the ground forces. Now, I think the ground forces. I'm not trying to create a balanced game. I'm just trying to edge it so that it's possibly a little tougher. It's still a walkover. Just this tall brigade is just too big. It units. Is what you would expect, but I think that the challenge is how quickly can you do it and how long can you hold out, depending on which side you're playing. Those are where the victory points and conditions would sort of come into play. I mean, you could just go really badly with all the air attacks. I mean, you could roll really well and shoot one of these planes down. I mean, that is what they are all hoping when they shoot at anti-aircraft aeroplanes. The $20 million hit. Because that's how much those things cost. But it's a bit like playing the lottery, I think. I'm not sure they win that often. So playing an advanced strategy or a forward-thinking strategy, we're sort of thinking, well, how much air power do we want to apply onto this? I mean, they are now down to 50%, and so there's 2, 4, 5, 6 defensive factors in fortifications, 18 in theory, in mountains times 3, so that's 54 thereabouts. So there's still worth 54 in there. So to get 1 to 1, I'd still need everything. That's if I'm doing the calculations right, and that's if my system works right, because they're basically in a mountain hex, which is tripled, and they're in a fortified hex, which is tripled. Now I'm not sure whether I got those calculations right, because every time I played it, I just walked straight over them, but that's after reducing them to nothing. And I'm getting 1 to 1 in the air power, so I think the air power is coming in a little bit strong, because I seem to be getting an exchange every time. With those sorts of odds, I would expect to be going in at 1 to 4, so I might have to review all of that yet again on this game. I'm just sort of trying to play things through, but if they're worth, because now they're not worth 54, they're worth half that, which is about 27. And they only had 8 going in there, so it looks as though they might not be calculating their incredible defensive factors. So, I mean, this is one of the reasons this is a beta game, because you're sort of thinking it's not so much that the mechanics don't work, it's the balance of the mechanics. Sort of thinking, well, that's a bit easy. This is why I played this sort of a few times. I prefer these small ones because they're easy to sort of get your head around and sort of engage in the mechanics. Once the mechanics are right, you can just scale it up and do the western front. Just a side result. Just a side note. I mean, I haven't actually done this or moved anywhere down this road, but I'm thinking of bringing in electronic countermeasures. There's 2 sides to that. There's the air side, but there's also the ground side. So, but I'm not sure how that would work, because, for example, they probably don't use electronic communications. If you had an army that was reliant on electronic communications of one sort or another, you can interdict that, and basically the result would be that if you had a signals unit or whatever, counter electronic warfare unit, there would be a chance that your units just wouldn't move, they wouldn't respond. But I'm not sure how to apply that, because if you were going up against barbarians, for example, like these people, not trying to be derogatory, but they're not, they don't have advanced systems. They wouldn't have any effect. They're already in the ground war phase, 2-week post-nuclear strike ground war phase where there's no electronic communications. Anyway, it's coming up to the end. You can't see the timer, but I've got a few seconds left. I think I'm going to go in and put this one together as an epic, just to play it through. So I'll see you in a bit, but you probably won't notice. So, back. Um, Essentially, continuing on with the airstrikes. One of the things I'm looking out for here are the anti-aircraft retreat, which hasn't done anything. As said, I was and am considering the broader strategy. Now, these units are now at 90%, so there's no point in putting in any more air power. They were at 6. That last DR result would have resulted in 2 or 3 depressions, so they've gone from 6 to 9. So now they've got 7 more sorties. That number will actually detail the number of sorties they've got left. So probably better off distributing those around these units. But even then, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, there's barely enough for one each. So I really have to start thinking, how much can I do with just this brigade? And is there enough? You know, I think there pretty much is, but they're sort of all fairly well entrenched. So that said, I'm going to begin the approach. Now this would be where it would be useful to know where the roads go, because you can see, although I know the road goes like that, it's quite hard to see with all the hexes, with all the units there. I should have moved him up earlier. Oh well. Anyway, no problem. So I will save the airstrikes for later. I mean, when I said there's 7, there's actually more than that. They've doubled up, but that would only be using them as they are. So doubling them up seems a little more effective. Although, of course, I should really look at the odds on that. Okay, so I'll go for the least well defended units. This would probably no effect at all. 1 to 4 odds, nothing. One of the reasons he's getting nothing is because he's so depressed now that he's only at 10%, so he's at whatever he was, 3, so he's at 0.3. You know, there's just nothing left of that unit. And to be quite honest, what I did last time is probably what I should do this time. Just retreat them, but I think it's a bit late to sort of do that, although I think I will. He's moved, fired, so that was a bit of a waste. I suppose you could consider the artillery is holding the fort, because that will put a zone of control around there. You know, opening this up opens up all of this strategically, but I don't think the rebels are thinking too strategically. And there's no more artillery elsewhere. So, what to do with the air power? So taking this unit out, I might be better off leaving that to. I think I'm just going to leave the air power there, so I can determine exactly what I can do with the ground forces. Okay. Well, this tank unit how's that for manoeuvring? zone controls in there. I'm not even going to bother firing on those small units. I think from experience, once they're at that sort of depression factor, they're useless. 1 to 4 odds. That's no effect. That's because they're heavily entrenched, which makes sense, and that's a nice big factor there. And let's just see how much they're worth. So 2, 3, 9, 27. They're worth 27 in there, which is probably how he got these odds, which makes sort of sense. Question is, can I oust him with just my troops, or do I need the air power? This is what I'm trying to weigh up. Now, he is in mountains, these are in hills, so these are going to be a little easier. Could be, could boil down to a 1-to-1 on that and getting us around. I'm going to cheat because I know that these units will advance into there, and I'm guessing, and I'm going to just walk right over that. I'm guessing it's going to be a 7-to-1. Yep, defender eliminated. So they lost their artillery by delaying its retreat. Another interesting thing about the air power and not using it is, that's interesting, you can't move into there. None of them seem to be able to move into there. Oh no, I didn't mean to do that. I need to refresh the screen. Because it's a mountain and I haven't defined their movement. We can almost look at that actually. Let's have a quick look at that. Under the rules, I know a lot of this isn't really as ideally placed as it should be. There's a little link here. So moving into mountain, the thing is I don't have all the units flagged up. So for infantry, moving into mountain is 6 movement points. So that's why I can't move them in there. And to be quite honest, I think I'm going to reduce that down to 3. I think infantry should always be able to move into a mountain. And I'm looking to review all of the movement rates and bring in fractions. It's a bit difficult because everything is integer based at the moment. So for example, the air defense, so that's an air movement, the air defense is not categorized yet, which probably means it's got a movement factor of 0 or 6, which is the default, the general movement. So probably defaulting to 6 because he's only got 3 movement, he can't move in there. So this whole sort of moving into mountain thing is really possibly could do with being reviewed. Anyway, so they're stuck there. The only option they've got is to move into there. So this armour this is quite interesting because they've made a mistake and they've been caught in this valley, and they're probably going to be mincemeat next. So anyway, I think I'm going to start sliding around through that zone control. I will try firing on that as artillery, see whether my odds get a bit. Only seems to have moved. Like that. I seem to have used all my movement points up for some reason. Okay. I'm only going to commit these units because I'm pretty sure I'm going to get 7-to-1 odds. Yep, defender eliminated. It's quite nice because he would have otherwise retreated. He would have probably retreated to there, which would have been quite inconvenient. So, now the only other thing I did intonate in the last video, voluntary rules. One of which being, I sort of think that to make this tougher, although this is just a game rule, to make this tougher, the player should be forced to leave some units in these key locations. Because at the moment now, I always think of this like kids football, where everyone chases the ball. Absolutely everyone. It's a swarm of people chasing the football, and no one's strategically doing anything else. I mean, there's nothing to stop anyone going in there or in there. This unit can move into there next, and they can shuffle around. That makes it difficult. That makes it harder because then you've not got any troops. But you could play it so that you put your weak units in there. So as long as it's got some military control in there, military presence, then it should be okay. So I might sort of put that sort of limitation in the rules, but that would be something the player would have to observe themselves. I couldn't sort of do that with the computer, although I have contemplated, and it is possible at some point to implement victory points. So I'd allocate essentially each hex could be allocated as being either possessed by one side or the other, just based on who was last in it, and possibly even the zone of control. That's a bit like the Hex Wars game, which is sort of a bit compelling. Every time you visit someone, so this would be under the Syrian control, this unit would be under the rebel control. So you'd end up with a map that sort of was quite interesting in its own right, showing who owned what. But that would mean that this would be under the Syrian control, so that would be, if there was victory points on that, that would be one, that would be one, that would be one. These locations can easily be flagged up as victory points, so you'd add them up, and you could give them a weighting, so these could be worth 2 victory points, and then you could keep a thing up here saying, defining who has more victory points, and then that would give a little bit of an impetus for these units to take these places over. But I don't really necessarily want to actually start putting in victory conditions, because it makes it a little arbitrary as to what the objectives were. We should be thinking about that. So I mean, a grown-up should be thinking, I shouldn't be leaving this empty, because it means that these units can get in there. And actually doing that, it's not just a case as I'm doing here, just trouncing everything, but I'm sort of playing on a video, not really sort of don't really have time to sort of maybe think of other things at a little more relaxed pace. So anyway, that's that move. I mean, the rebel player really does nothing for the whole game. It's just a case of fingers crossed every time they come up against one of their strongholds. What I'm loath to do is to start using my air power. Oh, look at that. 1 to 2 odds exchange. That's sort of that's, I think, a reasonable strategy for artillery. I'm not firing at this one because it's just too heavily defended, and we'll have to take that out. But if I can achieve those sorts of results with the artillery, then long-term objectives for this game seem again in the Syrians' favour. Going up to another 15 minutes. These videos turn out to be epics, which is quite bizarre, really, considering that they seem to take no time at all to make. I mean, anyone watching these might as well watch a feature film. Okay. Well, there's been a little break there. only do 15-minute videos with this free video thing. I did actually in that period adjust the movement into mountains, etc. So should be able to do infantry into mountains now. The movement was 6 before, so let's see. It's good. Exchange on that. Knocks them down a little bit. So these people are at 90%, these are at 90% too. That only leaves me with 6 strikes, with 6 doubled up strikes. The question is, it's the way to move, so okay. Did I find the artillery? So these units should be able to move there now. Yep. And then there, and then there. Right. Well, I still think they're going to be a tough cookie because of their defences. Now, it's interesting because my brain is not capable really of adding up all of those odds. You know, I mean, what are they? There's 2, 3 in mountains, 6, 9, tripled again, 27 minus 3, 24. I've got 4, 9, 16, 20, 31. I've got about possibly 2 to 1. Maybe a 1 to 1, 2 to 1. My mind gave up on those calculations just at that sort of last bit. 2 to 1. And an exchange. You see, this is where it's going to get challenging. Now, there's a little bit of an error after the results. All the units suddenly appear down there. That shouldn't be happening. Again, a little bit of a bug, but it's not critical. But now I've got fatigues on everything just for that one unit. This is why I'm doing this second extended video, because I think if that sort of thing carries on, getting all of these units is not going to be simple. So much so that I might have considered attacking this and preserving the air power, and maybe splitting up the air power, or I mean, I should have won that. A defender retreat would have been nice. He's only at 1 fatigue now. How much are these? Yeah, they're only at 1 fatigue. I mean, that's nothing. I mean, that was a catastrophe for the Syrians. Well, that was 1 to 1 odds. We really need to sort of do more there. So I think the game's afoot. It's not as simple as it seems. And to be quite honest, historically, all they did was take this place out, which is easy, and this place, and they haven't gone much further. But presumably they would be regrouping, and there's no regrouping option in this game. I mean, recovery, the recovery thing will possibly work, but we're talking about strategic recovery, where they regroup their army and become fresh and whole again to go and take the next bunch of towns. Because of course some units would have to be defending here and here. They wouldn't all be chasing this unit like they are. But it's interesting as a game. It's in its own right. I mean, another little interesting thing is, do you cross into Turkey? Well, the Turkish hate the Syrians. I shouldn't say that actually, because I don't know. I'm guessing from what I read, they really, they rather discord in Syria. I think everyone wants Assad regime overthrown, and I think Turkey is pretty much with that. So I don't think they'll be really sort of looking for the Syrian forces to go into Turkey. So that's an interesting border because, you know, in theory, you could then move over there and start World War III. You know, that's the significance, the implication of this game. I mean, I'm not saying it would, but you know that is Turkey, and there are probably Turkish troops in here, probably shelling these units, because a lot of these units, I'm not sure who they are, and to be quite honest, I can't really remember. I'd have to sort of look them up. But a lot of these rebel factions are being supported by the Turkish. You can sort of figure that out when you look at who the Kurds are fighting. So, and there is a distinct possibility, if that is the Turkish border, that these units are being fed by Turkey with arms and ammunition and money and people, forces, and this is quite significant, you know, cutting that border line up. It extends elsewhere. You have to look at the border map for that. So, again, now the thing is, do we go for another one-to-one? I mean, it's damaging, or do we try and commit some air power now to whittle that down? I mean, it's just so difficult to decide, really. I think I'm just going to have to go for another one-to-one attack. I'm going to do this. Well, that was 3-1 this time, and defender eliminated, so there was no loss to me. So the odds are back in the favour of the Syrians, and everyone's stacked up in there, and we didn't use any air power. That could have been a make or break situation. You know, if I'd got too many more fatigues, it would have been really damaging. So now in this situation, I think possibly the Syrians would be regrouping, and they wouldn't be sitting out there. They would be defending and possibly striking across the whole area. And I do feel that I want to sort of play it that way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get a couple of these little units to play the game of he's going to go there and he's going to go there and hold this line. I'm going to do that because I want to sort of play it, you know, with a tentative, with a small hint of maintaining a strategic front as opposed to just chasing the ball around. So now that means I can go and chase these people. So this one I think is going to be the tough one. The thing is, again, I can't really figure out what hex they're in, but I think they're in this yellowy one here, which is desert. In fact, all of this is not hill or mountain, so these are all going to be a little easier, and this is going to be the worst one. So I'm going to actually commit my air power to taking this out. 2-1. 2-1, that's so sad. No result. It's also worth noting that the air defence has achieved nothing so far. I'm not suspecting that there's anything wrong with the rules, although there could be. I mean, we've had no determination that the air defence is actually working. But 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, there's no other air defence units in range of that, so he would have only been a 1, which is very small. And then next, well, I could get some units. There's no rush. Well, it doesn't matter who I send in now, I'll send the artillery in. 1 to 2, attack and retreat, so no result. But even at 1 to 2 you can get an exchange, it's worth doing. In fact it might if you were just sitting there firing artillery at them for a few turns. Okay. Right, well I'm going to put the air power onto this unit because I actually want to start at least getting some fatigues on that. Oh, that was nice. Defender retreat at 1 to 1. Defender retreat should give you 3 depression factors on that. Yep. So that is a very nice result. However, you know there are only 4 airstrikes left, so you get to see and what happens there. And I'm going to start enveloping this unit. I'm going to fire some artillery in there. That's an exchange, so that was another depression factor on those units, which is good. And Siba is now held. This unit is going to hold Salma, and that gives me at least the pretense that I'm playing strategically. I'm not going to attack this one yet because I want to just use my artillery, which I can. I think that makes sense. So it's a longer game. I could have used my artillery a little longer in there as well instead of taking those risks. And there's quite a stack in there, so I think I'm happy with that 30% there for the time being. Two to 1 and exchange. Oh. And the air power is having an effect. I think the artillery is what's going to make all the difference because I can, no matter what I do, I can sit there with artillery and blow units up. And just for the hell of it, I'm going to defend the artillery. So these units are set. Result. Okay. So this is the concept of siege warfare. Result. It takes time and is quite boring. Precious air power. To be quite honest, it's not as precious as it was because I can just go around with this artillery. And I think it's what basically, this might sound boring, but what Syrians have got to be doing, just walking around with their artillery units bombarding these places, because ISIS don't really have the ability to attack. I mean, they never did. You know, it was the capitulation of the Syrian army that sort of really allowed them to do what they did. I mean, you just can't fight against tanks and artillery with infantry support and air power. That's what an army is. You know, somehow both the Iraqi army and the Syrian army failed. I was reading just the other day that after 13 years of democracy in Iraq, it's becoming quite apparent that everyone there is corrupt, which is one of the reasons why their army has failed them. Okay, we're coming up to another 15-minute break, so the situation is looking fairly clear. And I'll see you in a minute and probably introduce myself as though in their brain. Okay, and a complete system meltdown there, so I'm not sure whether the video survived. There we go. So, taking a strategy of surrounding each town and then bombarding with artillery, reserving our airstrikes for a little more certainty. And I don't think there's anything that can go wrong with this strategy. Now, in a more conventional war environment, you might say that the artillery is limited by ammunition failure, and that could be a fair observation. But A, this game's not like that, and B, I think the consumer got unlimited ammunition. It's not a tactical scenario, and it's replenish. But I have had some ideas for supply lines. Now, I wouldn't do supply lines complete because it's too difficult. Or at least I haven't figured out a way of doing it simply. And I would say that it's not possible to do simply because the permutations become too great. However, what could be possible would be to determine what's within the next 2 hexes. So as long as there's nothing, as long as they can get a route out of 2 hexes, then they're in supply. However, then I would have to have things like supply, in the rules, and I'm not sure how that would really work. You'd have to sort of say that the artillery had a certain amount of ammunition, etc., etc., and that would just be quite complex. And I'm not sure that I really want to sort of achieve that. I mean, the morale itself is difficult enough. Paying attention to the fatigues. Although, to be quite honest, the whole thing with artillery is quite, it's interesting. It would be more interesting if their ammunition was limited. But I think in this scenario, what's actually sort of more limited is the fact that the rebels don't have artillery. So, I'm gonna, I don't know. Have I done this artillery yet? Yep. I mean, if ISIS actually had, the rebels, if they had artillery, this would be a very different game, but they don't. And so, I think strategically, you've got to say, well, if you're rebels, you wouldn't really want to make a strategic hold on something when you didn't have any artillery, even if it's just a little bit. Now, what I do have in the running is what I call attrition. So this unit would be able to carry out attrition against all of these units. But so would these. So again, they would lose just the numbers. And attrition is sort of like small arms fire, sniper fire, mortar fire, small skirmishes, incursions, but not actually moving into that hex. So they would be firing each other at a quarter value. Now this unit is now down to 3, so they're at 70%. So they would be minimal. Whereas this this armour, when I get these rules sorted out, it'll probably be a million years from now. This armour would actually be able to fire into this hex. And I'm thinking at full strength or 3/4 strength, but it'd be significant. I'm also planning on making armour more significant if it's firing against just infantry and nothing else. Then it gets 50% bonus on its factors. So this would actually be firing 7 against that. So this would be a 1-to-1. So that would take it up to a 1-to-1 attack. I want to make, because at the moment the only thing that armour has going for it is that it's faster than infantry. It's not really that strong apart from the factors, so it needs to be, I think, more fearsome, because the tanks are fearsome. Just because tanks become a little vulnerable in built-up areas where there's a lot of infantry with anti-tank weapons, that's sort of secondary, really. In general, they're pretty well armoured, and you know, they can make all the difference. And there are actually, even in games that have been created here, quite rare. So when the armour is there, I think everything should focus around the armour, in support of the armour and what the armour does, as opposed to the armour just being another fancy, counter, and it's just adding up the numbers. Armour will be a little more vulnerable when in built-up areas with infantry, but if they've got infantry support, I might negate that. So if armour's on its own with infantry in a built-up area, then that's something different. But if they were in an open area, it wouldn't. So anyway, those are sort of thoughts. Essentially, I think as a simulation, it's demonstrating it's quite viable for the rebels to defend when the Syrian army have so much artillery. Artillery. No, it's fire. Perfect. I mean, one of the problems with artillery is that it's not as complex as armour, but you still need logistics. You still need to get a fairly constant supply of what are essentially quite complex pieces of ordnance. The shells, they're not like bullets. They're actually quite difficult to make, and I don't think you can make them. I don't think you can make bullets, although I think firing cats and powders and things, they're a little. I don't think you really make them in the field. I mean, you could, push come to shove, but you need a factory to make those. But you need a big industrial complex to actually make artillery shells and to supply them, and to effectively manage artillery companies and regiments and battalions. And the rebels just don't have that capability. They're fairly sort of low tech in all regards. Most they can actually muster is a bunch of people in some pickup trucks with guns welded in the back. Anything more complex than that, it's a bit beyond them. That's why they can't maintain a tank force. That's why wars are the providence of governments, which brings into question the purpose of government, really, because they're the only people that actually commit they're the only people that propagate big scale wars. Just as a small observation on this whole Syria thing, I don't really know much about it, but it seems to me that the people doing the most damage are the governments with their aircraft and artillery. I don't think the rebels with their AK-47s are doing as much damage. They are blowing up ancient monuments and blowing up temples and things, but they're not blowing up entire cities. They just don't have the ability to do that. It's only the governments with their massive power that can actually turn cities to rubble. I'm not going on a rant there, it's just some observations on some of these little tactical things. Okay, we've got a result, defend the retreat. So that now means that this unit... that was interesting. Because he's eliminated now. So what I've just found out is that there's another little rule in there that possibly being tweaked, because they wouldn't have routed because it was artillery, but because they had a DR result and there were no available hexes, it said there's no hexes, eliminate the unit. So I'll have to rewrite that and I'll probably forget. So that's going to pop up again and again, because I'm not in a position, in the state of mind, to actually do that now. But anyway, that saved me attacking them. So now I can start moving on to other places. So this unit only has 2, 6, 4, 4, 6, 2. So this is going to be easy. Bit of a cookie. How to do it. artillery doesn't want to move into the hills or the desert. Oh, he's got zero movement. That's another reason why he doesn't want to move. Another reason. Okay. I think the Syrians are pretty much going to wipe do this. One thing I keep starting to say things and then maybe forgetting, but I think one of the things that maybe is apparent is that the air defence is of absolutely no use if there are no airstrikes. I'm not using the airstrikes, and now I've still got 3 airstrikes left. I think they're now not essential, and I've got this artillery strategy in place. Now, the rebels would really want to be somehow taking that out, but they have no means to do that, so again, it's tough cookies for the rebels. They're just sitting there waiting to be picked off by, essentially, as long as the Syrian government in this situation can remain cohesive, they can get their entire country back. It's things, when you're thinking about the implications of this in the real world now, it's it's the Turkish and Saudi Arabia that are sort of, and of course the US-UK alliance that are really the only thing that can help support these rebels. Really, the Syrian army can take as long as they want. Assad's already said that he wants to take the entire country back. I think one of the things, not my interest, I don't want to sound political because I don't trying to be completely neutral on all this sort of stuff, sort of things pragmatically, but I think a big driver is the Bleeding Heart Brigade, all these refugees and innocent people and war, yes, and there's nothing that really can be done about that if he's going to take his country back by military force. That's what war is all about, an extension of politics. But you've got to sort of wonder, what their hidden agenda is when they're trying to stop him doing that because of all the people that are being displaced, etc. It's complicated. One of the things that is, I think, unique about this particular conflict is it's exceptionally complex, and it's more complex than anything that you can really think of. Because most conflicts usually had 1 or 2 protagonists, and that was it. Vietnam and the Viet Cong with their Russian, Chinese sort of backers, but it's pretty much the Viet Cong, North Vietnam versus South Vietnam. A couple of forces pretty aligned against each other, but here you've got 3 or 4 forces all aligned against each other. I did think, my game only has scope for 2 players, and really it needs scope for 4 or 5 players. And what you have, one person does their turn, you'd have four people doing their turn before you could move. It'd be silly. We've had Turkish forces there. What would they do? Turn them with the rebels? Are they with the rebels? Or do the Turkish forces fight on their own? Anyway, coming up to a little micro break. Pretty much going to be a Syrian victory. Okay, continue. I'm not sure whether I've missed out some of these recordings. There might be a big jump somewhere, I don't know. Can't quite figure it out. Feels like I've been doing this forever. Maybe not. Okay, so artillery is fired. Not everyone appears to have moved, so Okay. Exchange. Wait there. I bet. 2 fatigues. Probably attack them now with those odds. But, have to wait a bit. Okay, I think I might as well commit my air power now. Necessity to keep it. 2 to 1. No result. Yes. The artillery that does the trick. What's going to happen is the rebels are just going to retreat because they can't win, not against these sorts of odds. I think that's pretty much, I mean, this isn't a simulation, but unless, I don't know, I mean, the thing with artillery, you've got to factor in, this is one of the things that they sort of detail a lot, have detailed before, is that you've got to look at all the what we call social, political concerns. I mean, if you are doing that with artillery and air power, basically raising the town. So we then have to sort of somehow quantify that in the game, and we can't really. But would they use their air power and artillery and completely destroy the town, or would they? At what point would they stop blowing the settlements up and engage in ground assaults? Blowing everything to hell isn't really sort of like the most efficient way of getting rid of the rebels, and that's the problem. They're in the buildings, and it comes down to house fighting. I don't know much about that, but I'm pretty sure that that's sort of what's happening. Well, I mean, retreat. Okay, so now it's really just a case of waiting. For the artillery exchange. Okay, 2 to 1 odds, that's an exchange. So again, in this scenario, what have we got? We just got this place blown to hell a little bit more. There isn't really going to be any Syria left. The thing is, I think that's again a little bit of a oh no, there's no Syria left. Well, there is. There's property all over this area. The people in these little towns are just generally the poor people, all the landowners, farmers. All this area is just full of settlements, and they're not being blown up. They might be being burgled and robbed and looted. But the thing is, the buildings are still there. The owners will come back and they live. They farm and live and probably carry on as normal. And so the effects of these cities being blown up isn't as dramatic. It's obviously terrible, but the thing is, no one cares about the people in the cities as much, so to speak. They are to some extent disposable. I would say that sounds cruel, but what I'm trying to do is put it into perspective in regards to the hierarchy of social order in any settlement. I mean, people that live in the country in the nice houses are usually the people in power and they're a little richer. They might have places in the cities, but the cities are generally where the poor folk live, in massive tower blocks and things like that. And so, those are the people that are being affected in these situations. Syria still exist, and the rebuilding of it will just be another power play within the social order, or something like that. Okay, more artillery. Blow those buildings up. Exchange, yep. So buildings get blown up, people get depressed. There won't be much left of those units soon. Well, they're only at 70%, 60%, 90%. I think it's going to be the last air assault. So I'm going to split it just for the hell of it. One here. Look at that, 1-to-1, defend and retreat. I mean, that was a fantastic result, and I split it. I should have been splitting all of them, really, I guess. And one here. Get a defend and retreat on this. Exchange. I mean, two great results. I mean, to be quite honest, I should have been splitting them earlier on, I think. So they're now at 4, and they're at 5. So 3. Do the artillery. Yep. So no more air power. That went out with a blast. So again, could be social political imperative to take this out. Let's say, for example, so go in with some artillery. Defend and retreat, nice big result, putting them, and they retreated. Now they shouldn't have retreated on artillery. I keep forgetting, how these things are. So that's that. So let's put in the assault. They shouldn't have retreated. It's just something to do with the rules there. So defender retreats. Okay. And that's it. So they've got some options now. They're probably going to move from there. They're certainly not going to start attacking that unit if she's dug in. This will be their only option. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, well, I'm pretty sure that with the defender retreat or eliminated, so that eliminates that stack. So Syrian army advance takes momentum. Let's see what sort of odds we can get in here. There are 50%. Exchange, that's into 60%. Let's see. Throwing caution to the wind. Defender retreats, yep, 3-to-1 odds. It's not astounding. Maybe we can get this one over and complete by this video. Okay, so they seem to be doing that okay. I'm not sure why. And their turn. Okay. exchange, that's good. So 1-to-1 odds. So the rebels are really going to be hammered. So a little shuffle. And by Gracie. Let's see. 7-to-1, defender eliminated. Okay. Of course, the rebels are just going to sit there and wait for the similar fate. 1-to-1, but no result. Fatigue level 1. Still a tough unit in there, but not for long. Okay. Well, let's try it. They can retreat, but that'll bring them out. Defender eliminated. And that's it. Well, that's nice. I mean, again, it's not a sort of game where I think it's designed to be balanced. I mean, I could, although to be quite honest, I've not read anywhere. I don't recall reading anywhere that the rebel forces were weak. It's just I think that they were pretty much at the sort of normal strength for that sort of area, but they've got this super sort of brigade marching against them, and it is a big unit. It's an army basically. I mean, it's only a brigade, but in the traditional sense, it's not just a few, couple of battalions, maybe a regiment, or it's got the artillery, the armour, and I think as a simulation, it's clear that they can steamroll over pretty much anything. I mean, including that fortified mountain position. I could put some more units in, maybe one strength unit in each sort of location, but I don't know. I think I'll just leave it at that because I think again, it's not supposed to be a balanced game. I think it's fairly interesting as a play out, and then there's an historic sort of reference to what was going on. Hopefully, I didn't miss any out because the Firefox sort of froze. That's it. So I hope you enjoy it. Maybe you sign up and play it yourself. Cheerio.